What's up, y'all? This is John, and I am excited to say that I have got Wes back with me for the next few episodes of the Nothing Finer podcast. If you go way back, you'll remember Wes. He abandoned us because apparently the Army's more important, but that's okay.
I wouldn't use the word abandoned.
But we are talking to Stephen Brooks of I cannot remember the Michigan State publication, but we are doing a Michigan State interview for the Puncher's Chance series. I'm pulling it back up here. He is a Michigan State writer for 247 Sports, so we're excited about that. But how have you been and what are you drinking?
I'm surviving. I
first
have to,
first summer back in the South in a while.
well, it's not just that; it's the fact that I got to be at work at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Oh hell yeah.
Yeah, so that's the fun part. And I just got back from the gym, so I'm drinking a protein shake. But it's not too bad. I'm enjoying my job, enjoying being here at Drill Sergeant. But this cycle is fucking horrible. It's a bunch of kids between their junior and senior year of high school.
Oh, you got your split up.
Yeah, so they all think they're entitled to shit and disrespectful, back talking, and yeah, it, it's bad.
Yeah, that's tough. That's
Yeah,
tough.
is it good? But other than that, I've been doing good. How you been, man?
Good, dude. I mean, I got home like 30 minutes ago from work, and I've been getting
Yeah.
home after 6 o'clock like every day the last week. But if nobody breaks anything tomorrow, fingers crossed, nobody
Knock
breaks
on
anything
wood.
tomorrow, I should be home at a decent time. So
Hell yeah, must be nice because I've been getting home at like 9 o'clock every night.
that was a choice. But I got a couple of blue ribbons over here.
Ooh,
Couple of them.
ooh, you can't go wrong with Paps.
It's cheap.
It's cheap and it works.
It's cheap. It's cold. It's wet. It works. All right. Steven is loading on here.
How's it going, guys?
Doing
Hey,
all
how you
right. How
doing?
are you?
Good, good. Can you hear me okay? See me
Yes,
okay?
sir.
Everything good? Okay.
All
Good.
right. So talked about it a minute ago, but we got Stephen Brooks with us. Writes about Michigan State for 247 Sports. Um, so go ahead and tell the listeners anything else that you'd like to about kind of like how you got to where you are and what you do.
Okay. Yeah. So this will be I believe it's my seventh season in this job. Um, went to Michigan State, grew up and born and raised in Michigan, went to Michigan State from 2010 to 2014, covered their Rose Bowl team while I was in college there. Then worked at a couple small newspapers for a few years. Went down to Indiana, worked at a small newspaper down there for 3 years, got to cover a little Notre Dame, along with some high schools and local stuff. And then through a connection, fortunately, managed to get this job, got to come back sort of home, not my home, but obviously a place I know. Like I said, so I've been back here since 2018. So was that 89, 21? I think it's my seventh season back. Like I said, maybe it's eight. I don't know. Not my strong suit. Um, and so, yeah, I cover football and men's basketball, dabble a little bit in recruiting for both, but primarily just sort of your regular team beat reporter type of coverage, both those sports.
Awesome. Don't worry about the numbers thing. We like to say on the show we're not mathologists. Um,
No.
I'm right there with you.
so we're gonna hit on 2023 for just a minute and then get into the good stuff, all the hope. Um, but last year the Spartans went 4-8 overall, 2-7 in conference, ranked 76th in total defense, allowing 388.8 yards per game, and 125th in total offense, gaining 289.3 yards per game. So how much of the team's performance last year do you think should be attributed to the Mel Tucker situation?
Um, Definitely some of it. I mean, that's a huge rug pull, right? Like you're 2 games into the season, and then It's so Saturday night they beat Richmond, handily, and then it's around midnight, crossing over into Sunday is when the first news drops about Mel Tucker being under investigation, and then it just snowballed from there. So then you had Washington coming in the next week, and we all saw what they became, and Washington handled Michigan State out in Seattle in 22. So that was as good of a passing offense as we've seen probably since like Joe Burrow and those guys, and Michigan State just could not get their back end together under Mel Tucker. So you knew that was going to be a bad game regardless. Then you have the rug pull effect of your head coach just got suspended, and that was going to be as ugly as that was. But when you look at the rest of the year, yeah, I mean, there was it's hard to stay focused, right? When you don't know what you're playing for, when your head coach is first suspended, then fired. It's like, where's the direction of the program? What are we building here? What are we doing? Now, I will say it was never going to be like a contention year. It's not like they fell, they were never going to be like this 8-9 win team. I think for me, I think I picked them to win 6 games, maybe 7. And that was kind of near the consensus, was like 5, 6, or 7. They'd win 5 and 7 the year before. It was like, just get back to a bowl game. The best talent that they had brought in was younger freshmen and sophomores. It's like, just sort of tread water, get to a bowl game, don't fall off a cliff, don't embarrass yourselves, and set things up for a 2024 where you could be competitive once those guys had a little more experience seasoning to them. Obviously, that went out the window, but still. So I say all that. I mean, they weren't a super talented team, but they could have easily been at least a 6-6 team. You go back and look at it; they melted down at Rutgers. I think there was an 18-point fourth quarter lead that they blew in the rain at Rutgers, muffed a punt, for a touchdown, like completely blew that one. They were up, I think it was 10 at Iowa in the second half, and blew that one. Punted to Cooper DeJean, he ran one back on him, and then muffed another one. Just a meltdown in the fourth quarter. So those are two. Maryland at home was a winnable game for them. Minnesota later on the road was a one-score game late that they could have won. So I don't think, they weren't probably as bad as the record showed, but yeah, it was, as you can imagine, it was hard to keep guys focused and keep everything on the tracks last year.
Yeah, I mean, to lose to Iowa after having a lead in the fourth quarter, like knowing how Iowa's offense is
Right.
through all of last season's got to be hard. But we'll get away from the bad stuff, Mel Tucker situation. We all know what happened with that. If you don't, you can Google it. I'm sure we all don't want to talk about that. So going to this new season with the hire of Jonathan Smith, how excited are the fans and the consensus around East Lansing?
I think pretty high. I mean, he's not like a guy that came in with like a big brand name. I mean, Jonathan Smith is about as generic of a name actually as you can get. But like, even like, I mean, you really got to be a nutcase like us probably, who stays up till 11 and midnight and later to watch Pac-12 After Dark and all these things to even know really who he was. But so I mean, I had sort of a faint idea of like, okay, this guy's building some stuff out there, and he's had a couple good years. But when you looked at this offseason, like it was basically him or Mike Elko were kind of the preeminent like gettable names. I mean, unless something earth-shattering were to happen, like a Brian Kelly to LSU, like nobody saw that coming. But in terms of like gettable guys from programs where they're on the rise, like it was him or Mike Elko, or one or two, whatever order you wanted to put it. And so they got one of them, and so I think people were happy with that. It seemed like they sort of won the offseason, if that's important. But he was a hot name, and they got one of the hotter names out there, and they got in early with him, and the timing uh, ended up being pretty fortunate. I mean, UCLA ends up coming open. He's a Pasadena guy. Washington ends up coming open. He had worked there before. So if certain things, if timing wise, a couple of dominoes fall another way, I don't know if they get Jonathan Smith, but luckily for them, they had him locked up early enough to avoid all that stuff. And the day after both teams' seasons were over, boom, he's announced and it's all sealed. So anyway, a lot of people are excited, even though he's not like this super well-known name. People are excited too that he's an offensive guy. I mean, they've had defensive coach after defensive coach here, and there's been some struggles offensively, quite honestly. Even during the great D'Antonio years, there was some bad offense being played, and especially late in his tenure, things really took a dip. So I think I think a lot of people are like, look, if we're going to be bad, if we're going to rebuild, let's be exciting on offense at least for once, and let's score 40 a couple times versus the other way where it's been the defense has been kind of okay at times, but the offense hasn't picked it up. So I think there's that part of it, and I just think he's got some we're not that far away from the Mark D'Antonio era, obviously, and I think he's got some traits that you can trace back and forth between them. They're definitely not the same guy. They come from way different backgrounds, but I do think there's some familiar DNA in what Smith wants to do versus compared to what D'Antonio did and what's been known as like a proven winning strategy here.
I mean, you could have ended up bringing Nick Saban back home.
Right, right. If only. Yeah, that would have been something, huh? There's people here I think still think that's probably more possible than that. So yeah.
As someone who's lived in the South for all but really 1 year of their life, I couldn't imagine being old and then going back to Michigan. It's just too cold.
I feel it. The older I get, the more I want to get out of here, to be honest. So I understand that.
All right, so we got one last note before we're going to get into the offensive side of the ball. And that's really just about how productive of an offseason that you guys had, mostly out of the transfer portal. Coming in 12th in the country with 24 total transfers into the program. Um, so we're going to move into the offense. So last season they were tied for 68th in the country with 25 sacks allowed, but they did get 3 offensive linemen out of the portal, including an interior lineman who followed Jonathan Smith to East Lansing. So how much do you think that group can improve this year?
That's my biggest question on offense, and that's the offensive line has been an underperforming unit for them for quite a long time. Even they won 11 games in 21. They had one guy who was a seventh round pick off that team up front. It hasn't been. They had Kenneth Walker is what they had, and it's a little bit of an exaggeration, but probably not as much as it might seem. It's been a weak spot for a long time. They've had some bad luck. They've had some bad projections. Some at the end of the D'Antonio era, there was just some poor recruiting. They were getting guys who weren't Big Ten players, and then as you guys know, I mean, you can't microwave an offensive line. Those guys are in your pipeline, and you need to see it through for 3 or 4 years. And once those guys started bubbling up and being guys you counted on, they weren't good enough, basically. And so there's been some of that. Mel Tucker and his guys did bring in a lot of size. Like that was their one thing. They always wanted NFL size. And so they did bring up the size in the room. And there's some intriguing guys that I think are now bubbling up to the playing surface that maybe can help. I don't, to your direct question, I don't know how much better they can be, but they need to be, because everything else I think on offense is at least decent enough. They're the unit I really, really worry about that could drag everything down, because they got a quarterback in Aiden Childs, I'm sure we'll talk about. They got a returning running back. The receiver talent is okay, good enough, I think, but if that line doesn't give them anything to work with, then they're sunk. So that's my number one question is, and you're replacing 4 starters last year, which it's one of those deals like maybe it's a good thing because they weren't good of a unit, but also some of those dudes have been 2 and 3 year starters. So you're talking like 40 games under their belt, of experience, and you just don't replace that easily. Tanner Miller, the one guy you mentioned from Oregon State, he'll be a plug and play guy at center. He was second team All Pac-12 for them, so he'll probably be their best lineman right away. But it's like, who else can they fill in around him, and just will they be a competent group? Can they even just be a sort of a middle of the road Big Ten offensive line? I think that'd be a solid step forward, quite honestly.
I don't remember the name, but when I was looking at 247's transfer rankings, one of the tackles I want to say was a 4-star too. Improved his ranking since high school. I don't remember where he came from or his name, um, but I thought that was a very interesting get.
Probably was AJ Dennis, I think, is the guy. He came from Illinois after one semester, so he's really a freshman. And he was committed to them for a long time, but then the coaching change happened, and he bolted. Which who could blame him? Who's going to stay committed to a program and no coach? So he ended up at Illinois, enrolled early, spent a semester there, and just didn't realize he wanted to be back home. And once the staff was in place, I think he was more interested in doing that. And he was a 4-star kid coming out of high school anyway, I believe. And so that's probably him, but just a true freshman. So not somebody I would expect to factor in right away, but definitely a good get to stash away in their pipeline because their tackle pipeline just it needed replenishment really, really badly.
I gotcha.
And you brought up the running game earlier. Coming out of last season, coming into this season, they're 125th nationally in the run game. So obviously you're going to need that big offensive line. You're going to need an offensive line to play together and to mesh. But you also are returning Nate Carter, and then you got a running back out of the transfer portal. Can't remember his name as well. Um,
I actually, when I was writing this, I saw it and I knew I couldn't pronounce it, so I didn't even want to tempt myself because hearing Gary Danielson for as many years as I have in the SEC, I hate a name pronounced wrong, so I wasn't even going to try.
Sure, sure. Ron Lynch Adams is who we're talking about here
Yes.
yeah.
from
Yeah.
Massachusetts. Yep.
So, how much do you think the run game will be able to improve with Nate Carter and him?
Yeah. Yeah. I think Nate Carter is definitely like if you watch the games, his numbers like he's not a guy you don't get a feel for him on paper. You have to watch these games. And that he had moments, flashes of brilliance. I think he's definitely an underrated back in the Big Ten. I think he's a guy who could play on a lot of good teams, quite honestly. But it all comes back to what we were just saying is what type of blocking is he going to get up front? This new, they're heavy into you guys watch Iowa. They're heavy into the wide zone run scheme. That's what a lot of what they did out of Oregon State, and then a lot of counters and bootlegs and stuff off of that. But it's not as much interior inside zone pounded up the middle stuff. They're going to want to stretch it and try to see if he can get to the outside. I think that fits his game. He's not in the top tier of Big Ten running backs. I wouldn't say that, but he's a number 2, I would say. And just based off of his numbers on paper, you probably wouldn't think that. But the guy's got some wiggle to him. He's really well put together at like 5'10", 200, 210 maybe, whatever he is. He's got some burst to him, some toughness. He just didn't really get to showcase it last year because he was playing behind a tough offensive line situation that didn't give him a lot of chances. He was a little banged up too. And he didn't have much of a wingman either. I think I don't think you want to feed him 30, 35 carries. I think he's better when he has a wingman with him. But he's a good player. He's probably after Aiden Childs, he's either their second or third best player on offense, I would say.
So the pass catcher room has some big names in it. Getting Jack Valing. Did I say
Belling,
that right? Valing.
Belling.
At tight end, and just the name Antonio Gates Jr. And I'm going to try this one too. Monterey
Montori.
Foster Montori. I tried.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Foster at returning at wide receiver. Is the guy one of those names, or is it someone else?
That's the question. Is there a guy? Does the guy exist in that room? Really? Jack Velling's a proven tight end. He's a good 3-down player. Caught 8 touchdowns last year at Oregon State. A lot of them in the red zone, but still caught them. And so he'll be featured prominently again, I'm sure. But can he be like a 800-yard, 1,000-yard receiver type of guy? Maybe, but I don't know if you really want that either out of that position necessarily. So that's the question. I look at the receivers and I see a lot of guys that would be good number 2s or number 3s necessarily. I mean, Antonio Gates Jr. was a 4-star coming out of high school, hasn't done really anything here yet. Popped into the transfer portal for a little bit, popped back out. It's finally time to start really expecting something from him. So we'll see if he can break through. Jerron Glover's another guy that came in from Florida in his class. Has flashed a little bit. I think he's got some talent to him, but just hasn't had a lot of opportunity. Can he be more? And Montori Foster is definitely the most experienced. Was a basketball guy, in high school, came to football late. And so just doesn't have a long football history. It's kind of taken some time. He's been injured too, but he's been like a 3rd or 4th rotation guy, over here. And they've had a couple pros going to Jalen Naylor 3 years ago, to Jaden Reed 2 years ago, to Keon Coleman as well at a while there. So he was kind of buried behind some guys. I don't know if any of them are go-to number 1 guys that can go into a game against Michigan or Penn State or Ohio State or something and just be a dude for you. I really don't know. Like I said, to me, right now, until proven otherwise, it looks like they've got a bunch of number 2s and 3s. And you can get by like that if you have it, by committee. It's not the easiest thing to do, but I don't know if they have that weapon on the perimeter. So I think Nate Carter's kind of up there, but I don't know if they have that weapon like where they're going to go on any field and scare people. Whereas when they had some of these pros these last few years, not last year, but a couple years before that, then that was the case. Like they had a dude, it's like, at least we got that guy, right? He can make some plays on anybody. I don't think they have that guy at receiver right now. They tried to get some in the transfer portal. They had a kid committed from Purdue. It wasn't going to, had some academic issues. They had to drop him. they're after another one, another couple, and sort of struck out there. So they have what they have now. And so it's about guys stepping up and sort of playing above whatever we've seen from them thus far.
So obviously, if you have the dude on the outside, you need someone to throw to them. So how is the quarterback situation looking in East Lansing right now?
That's where the dude is. So Aiden Childs was the highest ranked recruit that they got out of Oregon State, I think maybe ever. Definitely at least in like 15 years, probably. Was a four-star kid out of the Southern California area. And he played a little bit for him last year. You know, they had DJU was their starter, but Childs was so good that he came in to camp and they were like, yeah, you're not redshirting. And then a couple weeks after that, they're like, actually, you're going to play every week. So they would script like every third series, or at least the third series of the game, and then maybe they would go back to him. But he played in 9 games last year. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but like threw for 300 some yards, like 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, I want to say. Ran for like 3 more. True dual threat guy. He's 6'4" with some, lanky 6'4" guy. Can move around. Very, very promising player. I mean, like I said, he had DJU. He had a good year, but they felt he had to be on the field. And he was a four-star coming out of high school. When he went to the transfer portal, he was a four-star again. 24/7 Sports, we ranked him as the #2 available transfer quarterback the entire offseason. And he wanted to follow Jonathan Smith and this staff here and not finish, but eventually finish, but continue what he started out there. He was very comfortable with them. He's a relationship guy. He's a very loyal guy, apparently. I mean, USC wanted him badly. A lot of people wanted him because he's very, very talented. So that's the one, like, he could be, we're talking about probably like, I would say he could be one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Whether his stats will bear that out, I don't know, because we just talked about receiver, offensive line, some questions, but talent wise, the guy's got it. I mean, if you really want like the darkest possible dark horse type of Heisman stuff, probably a year away. I shouldn't have even said that probably, but just keep his name in your pocket because the dude's got a ton of ability. They just need to get a little bit more around it. But like he's like the one sure thing to me, and that's probably even a lot because he is a sophomore. He will be a first-time starter, but a lot of ability there, and he showcased it in games last year, in brief glimpses. So now it's like, all right, you got to be the guy every day, every snap, every rep. How do you handle that? Can he raise his game to that stage? So there's a lot of excitement around Giles. He's kind of carrying the program on his back right now, to be honest. He's their best player offensively, at least should be. And then behind him, they brought in a veteran transfer from North Dakota, a kid named Tommy Schuster. Played 5 years at FCS, set all kinds of records. He's a Michigan kid. And so he's like the perfect backup in this era. That, like, he understands the deal. Like, he's not going to be the guy. He's played a ton of football, won some games, set records. He's not going to be scared if you throw him in there. Because otherwise, the quarterback room, I should mention, cleared out with the coaching change. All 3 scholarship guys left. So there's no returners in that room. So It was either going to be Childs and then 2 freshmen behind him. And then now they went and got this Schuster kid, like I said, is a veteran from FCS. And I think he just checks all the boxes of like a perfect backup in this era to where he understands the deal. And I don't think he's going to be like a bad egg in the locker room. Like, why am I not playing? He totally understands the situation coming from where he came from.
Yeah, last year's quarterback situation was, I mean, just from looking at the stat reference page of the amount of guys that threw passes last year, I
Yeah,
was confused. Like I was past shocked. I think I saw 6 different names that threw passes last year.
probably. Yeah, it was not handled well. So they start out the year with a guy named Noah Kim. He was actually signed by Mark Antonio's staff, so he was a holdover when Mel Tucker came, and he finally got his shot. And just he just wasn't a power 4 quarterback. He just wasn't a Big Ten player. He's at Coastal now, and maybe he'll be all right there. He just didn't have the arm, didn't have the processing to cut it up here. And then they went to Caden Hauser, who was a 4-star Elite 11 dude, was the old staff's like first big time quarterback recruit, and a lot of people were excited about him. And he just wasn't ready for the moment either. He's at Eastern Carolina now, and we'll see what happens with his career. I think he's got some talent, but he was just too young and hadn't developed nearly to the point to handle that job. The kid that was really interesting was a true freshman named Sam Levitt. He's at Arizona State now. I believe he won that job. And he just came, whenever he came in, it was lightning in a bottle. I mean, there was just that it factor to him. And you guys have all seen it, when a quarterback comes in, he just has that spark. When things weren't working, whatever it was, with his feet, with his arm, he could move too. He was an exciting guy that with a true dual threat ability. So, but they really mismanaged him. They played him late in the Maryland game for like one series. They played him very late in the Michigan game and they lost 49-0. There was no hope of that one. So you burned 2 of his 4 games with the redshirt thing. And again, a program with no direction, with no coach, no future, at that time. He eventually said, and they never made him the starting guy. So he eventually was like, look, I'm done after 4. And I think it would have been different if they would have like given him the last 3 games and said, hey, those are yours, go after it. But they didn't do that. He looked like the most promising, he looked like the most talented, and he looks like a guy that maybe was, that you really hoped he could have hung on to through the coaching transition. Now, I think he had a bad experience with Jonathan Smith in high school, so he might have left anyway from some stuff that came out later. But yeah, Sam Levitt showed the highest ceiling of all of them, but they really mismanaged it by playing him in those early games, not considering whether or not he might want to keep that red shirt later. And it's literally, I don't even think it was a discussion to show you how just discombobulated this program was last year, to not think about when you put them in what that might mean for later in the season. They didn't even seem to consider that. So totally mismanaged. Like I said, if they would have given him 3 or 4 starts at the end, things might be way different. And they might have won a couple of those games because, as I said, he provided the best spark for them. So it was a mess, and it seemed like they didn't really know what they were looking at because the third guy they turned to looked like the best one.
Yep. So with the OC coming with Jonathan Smith, what is the expectation of the offense this year? I mean, I don't think it could get much worse,
Right.
but I mean,
Right.
there is always worse. So, what is the
Yeah, there is.
expectation and the consensus around Michigan State?
I think just like competence, like play clean, don't turn it over a ton. Like start there, right? I mean, you can only do so much about your talent, but don't beat yourself. Don't turn, Mel Tucker's debut game will always be infamous for 7 turnovers. Maybe it was even 8 against Rutgers in the game they lost. It was comical. I mean, they couldn't do it's quarterback center exchange. They were fumbling it all over, interceptions. Unlike for the first completion, I think got fumbled. It was 7 or 8 turnovers that day. And so you don't want to see stuff like that. Just clean, competent football. People want to see like a plan that makes sense because nobody, the fans up here had turned on the last play caller quite a while ago, just for kind of being vanilla and unimaginative. I think with Jonathan Smith is a Chris Peterson disciple, and then his OC obviously is within that tree as well. So we're talking like a lot of motions, a lot of pre-snap candy, stuff like that that'll look fun and interesting. I think that the reliance on a tight end and bringing that back in, maybe even double tight, some fullback stuff, some old school type of principles weaved in there, I think will be exciting for people. But the expectation, I think, is for Childs to look like a very, very good, promising young player. Maybe not an outright star right away, but people want to see Childs show what the hype was all about, show glimpses of greatness and see if he can carry them a little bit. Honestly, the offensive line, as I said, is a major concern. I don't think they have a receiver dominant that to kind of carry them in the passing game. So I think Childs is going to have to be that guy for them on offense. I think he's going to have to use his legs quite a bit probably as well. So that's kind of the thing. I don't think, people around here, I don't know if I'm spoiling the ending, but people around here just want to see them get to a bowl game, to be honest. So that's not going to require too much, too much brilliance. It's just kind of like, just kind of perform to your abilities, I think is kind of where they're at.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to move on to the defensive side of the ball. 9 of the 24 transfers were in that front 7. So, what do you make of that level of commitment to bringing in those guys?
It says a lot about what they thought about what they found here, and they had some major losses. I mean, of their transfer losses, the 3 biggest I'd say are all on defense. 2 defensive tackles. Simeon Barrow was a starting defensive tackle, an all-conference type of player. Went to Miami, and then Derek Harmon, same thing, starting guy. A lot of experience all-conference type of player, went to Oregon, and then Jaden Mangum, safety, starting safety, went to Michigan and broke the code and crossed the line there. So he's a persona non grata because he did that. So, but those, I mean, we're talking about three starters, and like I said, I think all of them could have been all league types. Definitely the two tackles are both NFL types. Mangum maybe will get there eventually. So those are big blows. I don't think they brought in anybody quite of that caliber, but defensively, some of the guys that are interesting, like and the other thing I should say too. So I mean, Mel Tucker and those guys were very active in the transfer portal, as you guys probably saw. But this staff so far is bringing in like the guys that they're bringing in. They have tangible proof and evidence to them as football players. Maybe they're from the group of five, maybe they're even FCS or whatever, but they at least have a track record on the football field. Mel Tucker and those guys too often were getting like former four-star washouts from the SEC that never played. A guy from Florida, a guy from Georgia that washed out, was a backup or a special teamer, or just somebody with traits. They're obsessed with traits and measurables. So as long as you look the part, come on in. But these guys don't care as much about that. They want to see production, and it might sound crazy, but that's the major difference that we're seeing so far. Like a guy like Quindarius Dunnigan is one of the transfers they picked up from Middle Tennessee, like a all conference guy at Middle Tennessee, proven dude. I think had like 10 sacks down there in his career. Like that's nothing, he's not getting a statue, but like it's a dude who's played some college football and done some things, and he'll probably, if not start, he's going to play a lot of snaps for him. There's quite a few like that at least fit in, and you're not making projections. Like I hope this guy play. Now he might not be an all league player, but it's like, all right, he's at least a competent college football player. So there's more than a couple like that. Um, what's it? They brought in three corners. They restocked that room. They really did not like the look of that room. Nakai Martinez is a safety from UCF. Was a 13-game starter down there. I think he'll walk right in and start. So there's some interesting pieces for sure. They restocked their linebacker room. I think 4 linebackers coming in from the portal. So there's a whole lot of new pieces, a whole new system, and probably should mention too, Joe Rossi, the defensive coordinator, was hired over from Minnesota. Him and Jonathan Smith have no connection. This will be their first time working together. So he was one of the last hires Jonathan Smith made, and took his time and settled on Rossi, who's quietly put together some really good defenses over there in Minnesota. Turned out some pros. Winfield, the safety with Bucks, and Boye Mafe and a couple others. They've quietly been one of the better defensive teams in the Big Ten. So it's just interesting that they don't have any kind of previous history together, and he'll be obviously running that entire side of the ball. So whole new look over there.
So talking about all the linebackers, the new defense coordinator, and everything, one thing that Michigan State did well last year was apply pressure to the quarterback and able to get to the quarterback. How can they improve, or can they improve on that this coming up season?
That's what I wonder, because those two D tackles, I mean, neither of them were like pure pass rush guys, but I mean, they could get after it a little bit. Barrow more than Harmon, and just the trickle down effect. Like when you have two monsters up there eating up blocks and all the attention they command, and how that frees somebody else up. I don't think they really have a dangerous like one-on-one edge rusher, and that could be a problem. The guys they're trying to play on the edge, to me, are more. You'd rather have them as backups, probably, to be quite honest. They're solid players. They can give you good snaps, but they don't like scare you, I don't think, if you're an offense. There's a sophomore, Jalen Thompson. Maybe he becomes that guy. He came on and better and better and better as he played as a true freshman last year, but I still don't think he's like that wiggly, like snap of the fingers, bend the edge type of guy. So I think that's something that they're missing. And so what does that mean? They have to manufacture it, right? They have to manufacture pass rush. One thing with this new coordinator, Joe Rossi, is he runs it's a 4-3, but the one end's a stand-up end. They just call it a rush end. They don't call it like a Bronco or anything crazy. But so that's got to be your dude on passing downs. And I just don't think they have somebody that's really built to play that position yet. Obviously, they'll get there as they identify and continue to restock and everything. But who they've moved, I'm really curious to see what that position looks like. So you want ideally like a 6'5", like 240, 250 type of guy that can really move. And if he's going to have to drop, you might have to take a back out of the backfield in the flat. He's gonna have to rush. It's a true hybrid linebacker DN thing. That's just a really hard job to do well. So finding somebody with that skill set is not easy. And I just don't think they have that guy right now. So I would expect this year they're probably going to be pretty aggressive in bringing people. And they do have different linebackers, different types, different body types, different skill sets. Maybe you bring a lot of those guys in on third down, but that's I don't think they have a lot of natural pass rush ability right now on the roster.
So what I'm hearing is y'all need a Harold Perkins from LSU.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't though, right?
Yeah.
But yes, exactly like that. That would be somebody like that would be perfect for their rush end deal.
So while they got to the quarterback well last year, they struggled to stop the run, coming in at 68th in the country in run defense. What do they need to do to improve in that area?
They need to be more sound tackling, and you're just more sound overall. Their system, I think, they had their linebackers thinking too much last year. They were doing two gap stuff up front, so it was a little more. They were a little more hesitant. This is going to be more of a one gap defense where it's just downhill, downhill, downhill. I think the D linemen are going to be more involved in making plays as opposed to setting the table and setting up plays for other folks. I'd say that's going to be part of it. And just staying healthy. They've had some bad luck defensively with injuries the last couple of years, but just between playing faster, playing a little more physical, and being healthier at the front, at the D line and linebacker levels, I think could go a little bit of the can help for some of that. And again, just clean up some of the tackling stuff, I'd say as well.
So you mentioned earlier the secondary and how that was not y'all's strong suit last year, coming in at 86 in the nation. You're returning you're getting four from the transfer portal, returning two of your top tacklers. Do you see the secondary improving this year?
So that also ties back to what we were saying, like what's that pass rush looking like too?
Yeah.
It's harder to say because I think they're really going to turn that over. They brought in three corners. The staff did not like what they inherited at cornerback. They brought in three transfer corners that I think I would expect at least one to start, maybe two. They have two returning guys that can play that'll at least be in the two deep. Now, whether they can hang on to their jobs, I don't know. One safety has to be replaced with Mangum, as I was talking about. So I think so. I think they can. I mean, there's not much further you can go. That people desperately want to see that. When I talk about like fan frustrations and with the offense or whatever, I mean, this was during their heyday a decade ago. They called themselves the no-fly zone, and they had two first-round picks at corner, and just the program really prided itself on having strong DB play. That was Mark D'Antonio's position. That was his trade, was DBs. Learned under Nick Saban, of course. So that it's like if there was one thing Michigan State had, they had DB play, and for that to drop off so drastically under Mel Tucker, who was also a DB guy, also came up under Saban, never made any sense. But he just couldn't get it right. They were dead last in yards per game, passing yards per game in 21. And then the next year they were dead last in interceptions with one. So it was a leaky back end the entire time for Mel Tucker. He could never get it right. And so we'll see, I guess, if these guys can. Now there is a little bit of a development and growth, natural growth. Mel Tucker did sign like 4 or 5 4-star defensive backs that they're finally now sophomores and juniors. Jade Mangum, who I said went to Michigan, was one of them. Dylan Tatum, who will probably start at safety, is another. Malik Spencer was a guy from Georgia who was right around a fringe 4-star. So anyway, there's some talent back there that's finally coming into like those production years that maybe now is finally the time they can turn the page. But it's been a rough go for quite a while. So that's the hope for sure. Between some of these younger dudes who are good, some of the better recruits of the Mel Tucker era finally growing up, and then this infusion of transfer talent to up the competition level, that something shakes out.
All right. So the last question we've got written for you here, it's about the schedule. And there's a tough stretch in the middle. There's a brutal 4-week stretch in the middle.
Yeah.
But compared to other Big Ten schedules, the rest is not as bad as it could have been. So, what do you think a reasonable expectation is for Michigan State this year?
It's reasonable to expect them to compete for a bowl game. So, I mean, the Vegas lines are either 4.5 or 5.5. I think that's not too far off. I mean, I don't know if you could say 6 is the expectation, but it's definitely gettable. I think there's a hard ceiling of probably like 7 wins for this team, probably no more than 8. I think that would be kind of a miracle season. I could see them winning 4, though, quite honestly. I'm right around 4 or 5 or 6. Um, you look at it, like you said, I mean, they're going to play a lot of teams that you look at on paper in that first third and that bottom third that are comparable enough in talent that we know as college football fans those are coin flip games. Um, like we talked about earlier, they should have beat Rutgers last year. It had an 18-point lead and blew it in the fourth quarter, but they did. So right now, if I'm supposed to say they should beat Rutgers in November this year, well, maybe they should, but then real life happens and wind and downpours happen and muff punts happen, real life factors. And so there's enough of those teams that I'm not certain that they're more talented than enough or that much more talented than. I said, oh, they're going to beat them. So I think I just see a lot of coin flips in there. Yeah, I don't think that middle section is going to go well at all. Iowa, Ohio State, Oregon, Michigan in some order there. I might have messed up the order, but I don't think they're winning any of those games. Can they go 4-0 in that start though? Going to Boston College, I think is probably harder than a lot of Michigan State fans realize. Again, I think they're going to be even enough. I just don't think Michigan State's going to be able to like out talent a lot of these other teams. So comes down to a bunch of coin flips, a bunch of dogfights, and do you show up that day? The other thing is when you're talking about that middle stretch, they're going to start off. You would expect them to win their first couple. They got an FCS up there, FAU's game 1. So like the new coach bump, all that. They'll start out a little hot. But how do they come out of that middle section for that last section? Because yeah, the bottom 4 games, it's nobody you're scared of. It's like Illinois, Rutgers, Purdue, and Indiana, I think actually in some order. And you'd say, okay, like none of those are threatening teams. But how do you come out of October? And I mean, like physically, where's your depth? Where's your health? After that grueling slate with Michigan, Ohio State, all those guys, where are your bodies at physically, but also mentally? Like, where's your confidence at? Did you just get drilled, 110-17 across 2 games, and your head's out of it, as bowl eligibility even on the table anymore? So just I can't predict that last stretch without knowing how they come out of that middle stretch, right? I mean, could they beat all 4 of those teams at the bottom? Sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, none of those teams are vastly superior to them either. But I just can't tell you where their heads will be and where their bodies will be going into November after that stretch. That's the really difficult part.
Yeah, a lot of people talk about how tough Florida's schedule is this year, and I don't think
Hmm.
enough people are looking at that middle stretch of Michigan State schedule. Because I understand Florida has arguably the toughest full schedule in the modern history of college football. But
Right.
but Michigan State has Ohio State at Oregon, which the travel alone makes that ridiculous in the middle of the year.
On a short week. That's a Friday night at Oregon now. They just switched it. So that's a short
Yeah.
week as well that you're throwing in there.
Oof.
And then Iowa, who knows about their offense if they even have one. I think they forgot that offense was an option, but they still have
Yeah.
a good defense. And then
Yeah.
you have Michigan, who nobody really knows what they're going to be this year, but they still did just win the national championship.
Right.
So, eh, one of the toughest schedules across the country just through that month. And I really
Absolutely.
don't think it's talked about enough.
Yeah, probably not. Because Michigan State they're just not on the radar right now. And I mean, that's their own fault. They haven't done enough to be on the radar or anything like that. And when you look at all the turnover, it's not a team. Childs is a big get. He was a headliner type of guy, but it's not like they brought in all these players where you're like, wow, they're going to be off and running right away. No, I think this is going to be a take your lumps type of year, and you just want to see if you're an MSU fan, like I said, that competence, clean football, and maybe put a scare into somebody. Can you play with Ohio State for a half? Can he be tied with Michigan? Maybe. I mean, Michigan maybe is the weakest of those 4. Maybe, maybe. Iowa maybe, depending on like we said, what their offense looks like. But yeah, I think it's. I think people are okay to they're not expecting too much. They're not going to be rioting the streets if things don't go super well. I think people around here understand the situation and understand that Jonathan Smith did it. It was kind of a slow build out there at Oregon State too. So it's probably what it'll be here. Now, can it be done is really the question because he got out there in 2018, as we know, that was a much different era of college football just that long ago. So can he build it, inch by inch, maybe the way he did out there here, when you can lose, 20, 30, 40 guys in an offseason? I don't know. We're going to find out, but he thinks he can. So I think people are a little more patient and it feels more substantive too. Mel Tucker was a lot of flash and pizzazz, and we found out that there just wasn't much substance behind it. This staff seems to be the opposite, where it's not a lot of talking. I mean, in his first press conference, he said the tagline is going to be low ego, high output, and so far they've behaved that way, and a lot of the program has reflected that, I would say. So um, that's kind of what people are waiting for up here. Is I think they're a little more patient, but eager to see what it can be with, like I said, a different spin, an offensive guy leading it. That'll be different, and we'll see where it takes him.
Is there anything else you want to hit on before we get out of here tonight?
Um, no, not really. I don't think so. I mean, they have those guys. Yeah, we mentioned the three Oregon State transfers. Childs, Tanner Miller, the center, and Jack Valley, the tight end. That's interesting. Just a sign of college football today. Like, not only can you get a coach, but you can get his quarterback. You can get a couple good starters with him. But no, that's about it. Like I said, it's it's all about the offensive line to me on that side, and then defensively, just how do all these new pieces come together? Because there are a lot of new pieces, and then talking about a new scheme, of course, as well. So how does that look? And 4, 5, 6 wins is probably about what I expect.
All right. Well,
So
we really go ahead, Wes.
I have one question. So people that know me know I'm really into uniforms and really into jerseys and stuff like that. What, and I don't know why this just popped in my head, but what is the consensus in your thoughts on the Michigan State lime green pants and state jersey?
I hated them. Most people hated them. You had a couple like contrarians that liked them just to be jerks, but all deep down, genuinely, almost nobody. A couple of the players, a couple recruits, actually, I think genuinely did, but not many. No, but they did make up for it, I think, with their black ones this year. If you guys have seen
Yeah.
those, they're
Yeah.
all black look. That was something that people wanted for years, and they finally did it. And it was a layup that was just waiting for them there. And I don't know why it took them so long, but they finally did it. They wore them against Michigan, of course, knowing they were going to get beheaded. So that wasn't a great look, but I think it's a really cool. I always like a good black jersey. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good with those, but the limes were a disaster. Nobody liked them. They lost their first game in them, I believe. Yeah, nobody liked a thing about those.
Yeah, that's all I had. So that's all I need to know because I don't get
Yeah,
to talk to
yeah.
many Michigan
What
State.
you thought is exactly how people reacted, basically.
That's all I needed to know.
All right. We really appreciate you coming on and talking to us tonight. I know I learned a lot. Is there anything you want to plug?
Just show us some love at 24/7 Sports. My site is called Spartan Tailgate. Sign up as a member, sign up as a VIP, and come get access to everything we do. Or Georgia fans, go mess with our site down there, or wherever fan you might be listening. We got a great team across the country, so yeah, just give us some support there, and that'd be all.
All right. We're going to hit on a couple more things before we get out of here, but you are welcome to log off, and we really appreciate you coming on.
All right, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it. It was a good time.
Have a good one.
All right, take care.
I want to say thank you again to Stephen for coming on and talking to us. I, I understand. It just, I still get disappointed when we're excited about these teams and we get on and the people we're talking to are like, yeah, dude, 6 wins. I'm happy with 6.
I I can't remember the time when, as a Georgia fan, I was like, you know what, 6 wins. That's what I'm looking for.
I can tell you the exact day as a Georgia fan that I said I would be happy with 6 wins. 2016 after the loss to Vanderbilt.
Okay, that's fair.
Because at that point, looking at the rest of the schedule, it's like, dude, is this going to be the first year of my life they don't make a bowl game?
Yeah, I can't remember Georgia never making a bowl game.
It's literally been since I was born, they have not missed a bowl game.
Do we have who has the no? We can't have the longest active bowl game streak, right?
Yep, they
Do
do.
we?
Yep. It was
Huh.
Virginia Tech was ahead, and then they missed one a couple of years ago, and then Florida State was ahead, and then had their almost decade of darkness,
Yeah, and
and
I don't see
then
that. And I don't see that ending anytime soon.
Florida State
No,
or
us.
Georgia missing a bowl. I was like, Florida State's decade of darkness not ending.
I mean, they did go 13-0 last season.
Yeah. No, any game after the first week of December doesn't count.
Yeah, we
They
all
shouldn't have even wanted to go to the playoff if it doesn't count after the first week of December.
know. Oh man.
All right, guys. I think that's going to do it for this episode of the Nothing Finder podcast. As always, follow us on social media at nothing.finder.pod on Instagram, at FinderPod on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Just search us there. Nothing Finder Pod on TikTok, Nothing Finder Podcast. One of the two. I forget every week. Don't hate me.
You'll find it.
Um,
Search it. It's fine.
yeah, you'll find it eventually. Don't forget to rate and review the show. Share it with your friends. Share it with your enemies. Share it with random people on the street. I mean, hey, you're on a bus, on a plane, on a train. Just everybody that has AirDrop open, just send them the podcast.
Oh
Be
dear
that
God.
guy. Be that guy. And if you get beat up, I will not pay for your medical bills, but I will thoroughly enjoy the story.
Right? We'll make sure to sell the story on the pod.
You know what? If you get beat up for sharing the show, I'll send you a sticker. But as always, guys, remember there's nothing finer in the land.
You're a drunk, obnoxious Georgia fan.